Hey, Mr. Grumpy Gills. When life gets you down, you know what you gotta do?
I don't want to know what you gotta do.
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming. What do? We swim, swim.
Dory, no singing.
Dory.
Dory.
I love to swim in.
Dory.
When you want to swim, you want
See,
to
I'm gonna get stuck now with that song now.
Sorry.
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. What's up, fam squad? I've got some pretty exciting news. If you listen to the podcast much, you know we've been building a pretty vibrant community of truly extraordinary people who have committed to an unconventional route through life. The Successful Dropout audience has been growing a lot, and I get a lot of people reaching out to me now with all sorts of questions regarding education, dropping out, opting out, entrepreneurship, resources, networking, etc. So much so that I decided it was time to create a more accessible community on Facebook so that we can all ask and answer these kinds of questions together, as well as celebrate our successes and encourage each other during inevitable adversity. So I've created a closed Facebook group, and I want to invite you to join it. If you follow Successful Dropout, if you resonate with our philosophy and want to help me grow this thriving community, go to successfulDropout.com/group. This community is for the rebels, the outliers, the innovators, the doers, and those who dare to dream and act on their dreams. If you're a dropout, an opt-out, if you're thinking about doing one of those things, if you're a parent, even if you aren't any of those things and you graduated school, I want to invite you to join. All that matters is that you resonate with the Successful Dropout philosophy and that you enter the group with the intention to provide value to the other members and not just receive value yourself. Again, go to successfuldropout.com/group to request admission. Once you're a part of the group, introduce yourself and get involved, and I'll see you there. What is up, Successful Dropouts? Get stoked because today on the show we have Dr. Richard Schuster. Dr. Richard is a licensed clinical psychologist and the host of The Daily Helping with Dr. Richard Schuster, Food for the Brain, Knowledge from the Experts, Tools to Win at Life podcast, which is regularly downloaded in over 40 countries. On his podcast, Dr. Schuster's guests educate and inspire listeners through their stories, expertise, and passion for helping make a difference in the lives of others. His mission is to help people become the best versions of themselves and, as a consequence, make the world a better place. A sought-after media expert, Dr. Schuster's clinical expertise and podcast have been featured in such publications as The Huffington Post, NBC News, Glassdoor.com, Reader's Digest, and several others, and I was just on his show, actually, and it was a very enjoyable interview. He's a fantastic host. But Dr. Richard or Dr. Schuster, I forget which one you would prefer me to call you.
Either one is just fine.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Richard, tell me a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Well, thank you for the very warm introduction, Kylan. So what I'm focusing on these days is my podcast. And what I really love about The Daily Helping is our belief that people can choose their own destiny. People can learn from the experiences of others so they don't have to go through the same trials and tribulations, become the best versions of who they are. Because if everybody is doing what makes them happy and what they're passionate about, the world becomes a better place. And along with that, because I'm a big advocate of doing things for others, acts of kindness. So we have this movement, the hashtag #MyDailyHelping movement, which I encourage all of our listeners every day to go out there and do something nice for strangers, post it on their social media feeds using the hashtag #MyDailyHelping. I'm trying to get 1 million people each and every day to commit those acts of kindness. And when we get to 1 million, we're going to make it 5. And when we get to 5, we're going to make it 10 and so on. So hoping to really change the world in a positive way.
That's right. I like that. Keep adding rungs to the ladder. It kind of goes along with what we say at the end of every episode, which is stay hungry, stay foolish. The stay hungry part specifically, just to never stop. Becoming the best version of yourself. I mean, that fits right in line with the Successful Dropout philosophy. And like what you already alluded to, one of the ways to do that is is to find out what you are innately curious about, innately passionate about, what you're innately talented at, and to sort of, direct your efforts and your time and energy towards that. And it sounds like you yourself had a bit of an interesting journey to get to that point as well. Something about a car accident. And I know you mentioned that earlier when I was on your show, but I'd love you to tell that story because you really cite that as a major turning point in your life.
Most definitely, Kylan. It's something that I even talk about on my website and put up the pictures because essentially I went through the steps that everybody is told by society they're supposed to go through. I went to high school, graduated high school, then I went to college, and I remember very clearly telling all of my friends at a bar on the last day of school in undergrad that I will never set foot in a classroom for the rest of my life, and I was going to go out and join the corporate world and make all kinds of money, and that was my MO. And so I started a tech company. And as I was developing that with two other guys, I was in a near fatal car accident in which I broke my back. And what was really wild about that was for anybody, and hopefully none of your listeners have experienced this, but the research shows, and I certainly experienced this, that when you're in a near-death experience, and I was sure I was about to die, I just saw this car screaming at me after I made my turn, time tends to slow down. There's a really cool neuroscientist named David Eagleman who's done quite a bit of work in this area. And it's kind of like the Matrix, to use a movie analogy. Like everything was just slowing down. I could see the glass shattering and the center console crushing into me. And my car started spinning towards oncoming traffic after the impact. And I remember telling myself, I'm about to die. And I actually, in the span of the whole accident, which was like a second or two, I had a conversation with myself, and the conversation was along the lines of all the people I'm letting down, and most importantly, how the life I've lived was not really a life of significance. And that was really the moment for me. And I healed. I did the physical rehab and all of the stuff that you do when one breaks their back. But even though I went back to work, it was kind of like I was there physically, but mentally I was not. I just wasn't. And I stuck it out, though, for a while. I stuck it out for almost 2 years because I was really scared. I was scared of letting down the people that were believing in me. I was scared of, having, particularly my family, not meeting those expectations. Like I was starting this great company and I was going to do all these awesome things. And that wasn't happening. And in fact, every day I stayed there, I got more and more miserable. So I dropped out, so to speak, of that corporate job, of the expectations of others. I decided to put my own happiness first. And even though I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, I knew that I had to make that change, and eventually I did. So I walked away from this thing, and the reaction I got from everybody was pretty negative. It was negative in that, I failed, or was I did.
They thought you failed? They said that you failed?
I mean, the perception was that I failed, and then everybody was kind of putting these expectations on what I should do next. Well, you should go to law school. Oh, you'd be a great trial lawyer. You should go to law school. You should get an MBA. And everybody's telling me all of these things, friends and family, and none of it was ill-meaning. None of it was malicious. It was just, I wasn't. Society kind of has these expectations as to what we're supposed to do with our lives, and I was no longer doing it. So when something doesn't quite fit the norm, it makes people uncomfortable, and then we try and fit things into boxes to make it right for ourselves. Like we just feel that's just something that humans do. When there's something that defies convention, it's aggravating. Like you and I joked about this on when you were on my podcast, that I was always, when Mom would ask me what did I want for breakfast, I would say spaghetti. And it was like, wait, you can't eat spaghetti. That's not a breakfast food. Well, why not? Because society tells us that spaghetti is for lunch maybe, but generally for dinner, right? But so anyway, as it relates to my story, to get back on track here, I essentially went from this 80-hour a week, misery to nothing, And I was just kind of sitting around. I had some money in the bank, and that was good. And one day I go to the grocery store, and I was just kind of wandering around. This was like 2003, 2004-ish. I don't actually know the year. But it was around the time that social media was really starting to take hold. And I know that many of you guys listening to this are, in that kind of, high school, college, post-college age. But back in the day, when Facebook was first out, it was only for college students. It wasn't like it is today. You actually had to have like a university ID to be able to get a Facebook account. So there was another service out there called MySpace, which nobody really uses anymore so much. and I overheard these parents saying, "What is this MySpace business?" And I heard my daughter's doing this, and can I, is this problematic? And I just butted in, which is not really in my nature. I don't really butt into people's conversations. But I said, "Hey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude on your conversation, but I've got a background in technology, and I could kind of talk to you about, online safety and what your kids might be doing." And it wasn't like a sales pitch. It was just me just kind of sharing some stuff I knew. And then they're like, "Oh my God, well, you have to come talk to our PTA. You have to." And it's not like I was doing anything else. So I said, "Sure." I didn't ask for money or anything. I just went. And so when I did that, one of the people in the PTA audience, I don't know why they didn't ask this guy, but he was actually a police officer for the cybercrime unit of that city's police department. And he came up to me after, and he's like, "Wow, that was really good. And would you like to come, do some joint speaking things with us?" So now I've got a gig, right? I'm going around with the local city's PD cybercrime unit. I'm giving these talks on internet safety to people. And that felt pretty cool. And then at one of these schools that I was at, an administrator came up to me and asked me if I'd be willing to be a mentor, which is like pretend therapy, right? You're just kind of hanging out with a kid and talking to them. And I'm, again, like, sure. So they had me, because they had lots of female mentors, but very few males. And there was a kid that was having some trouble. He was a 7th grader at the time, and they asked me to, sit with him, and we started hanging out once a week and talking. And I'm not so arrogant to say, I'm the reason this kid's life turned around, but I was certainly part of it. I was impactful, and it felt really good. So here's another kind of data point for me where I'm like, talking to others, cool. Helping kids, cool. And then decided to apply for graduate school and got in, and then, went through 2 degrees and became a clinical psychologist, and, the rest is history. So, that's my journey. But everything I've done since that accident has really been, to fulfill this mission of helping others. So, in whatever I'm doing, whether it's in my clinical work as a psychologist or the podcast or this nonprofit, which I'm in the process of getting off the ground, it's all mission driven for me. But it's the same mission, and it's who I am, and it feels really good.
I love that, and I would wonder, for people listening, what suggestions you would have for, I don't know, mechanisms to help people reach that point themselves. I mean, obviously, we don't all want to go through a traumatizing experience where we're about to lose our lives in order to discover and be inspired to be the best versions of ourselves. And so I wonder what specific maybe exercises or techniques maybe you could suggest for people to do that, because I would say that really describes a lot of people listening are younger people who have really been indoctrinated in a lot of these systems that we usually are, formal schooling being one of them, and really indoctrinated into what society says, hey, these are the boxes, these are the boundaries, this is what you have to be like, and people are longing to sort of escape from that, find out what they're truly capable of, and live up, to that full potential.
I think it's a tough question, Kylon, but what I would say is, you really have to listen to that inner voice. And, as I look back and I think about my high school days, when I was maybe a junior in high school, they dragged all of us down to see the guidance counselor who had us take these vocational tests as to what we should be when we grow up, right? Everybody does it in high school, or used to anyhow. And mine said I should be a therapist or psychologist, which is funny. But that's not what I wanted to be. What I wanted to be was a talk show host. It's all I ever wanted to be, was a talk show host. So in essence, it's ironic for me because I'm doing it now. And I may not have even needed the degrees to do it. Now, it doesn't hurt, and it certainly has not hurt the podcast that I'm Dr. Richard and not just Richard, right? Like there is something to be said about, having that degree in the work that I'm doing in the podcast. But I wouldn't say that my graduate training gave me any inherent skills to make me a good podcaster. And it's just something that I like to do. And so I think for those of you listening and you're kind of on the fence, should I go to college? Should I not? Think really deeply about what you enjoy, because my philosophy is, if you can find something you love to do, it helps the world, and you can make a living doing it, like that's the Holy Trinity to me. Like, no disrespect to the religious, like that's the trifecta. So, but society is going to get in the way of that. We have to go to college. Why? Why do we have to go to college? If you really are passionate about medicine, you have to go to college, because if you want to become a doctor, you can't just do it, right? But, in this era of digital media and ways to connect with people, I wouldn't say it's like it was 20, 30 years ago, where people have to go to college, take on that debt, take on the pressures. A lot of people, I'm sure you've talked about this in other shows, they do it to fulfill familial expectations. My mom and dad say, I have to go to college. Yeah. Do you? Are they paying for it, or you? It's like, what you give up 4 to 5 years of your life. And don't get me wrong, I loved my undergraduate experience. It was some of the best years of my life, for sure. But not everybody needs it. Not everybody needs it.
Yeah, I love that. And, a couple other things we've talked about on the show to sort of get into that mindset is to, one, think back to when you were a kid, before your parents told you had to go to school, or before friends or society said you had to study this, for instance. Think back, what did you want to be when you were a child, just a child, before you knew about all these things that you were supposed to do? If you could remember that, possibly something in that realm is something that maybe you want to go back to at this point. Another way to get in that headspace that's worked for me in the past is to imagine you have $1 billion in your bank account tomorrow. And your task with that money is to build something that is both, smart, something that's smart to build, something that makes you happy as well, is the second thing. And the third thing is something that's useful to other people, something that's going to make the world a better place with that $1 billion. And this is assuming you get all the partying and you buy the Porsche or whatever, you get all that out of the way. Now it's time to build something that's useful, that makes you happy, and that's smart to build. What would that be? And to just sit down and do some journaling on that.
Are you asking me at this point in time what I would do with $1 billion? Is that
sure.
The question?
I could throw it your way. Do you have an answer?
Yeah, I mean, I would do.
You're probably already doing it.
Yeah, I am. I would do exactly what I'm doing today. What I would do is that $1 billion would go directly into my nonprofit, which I'm starting, which it very much is the chocolate to my podcast, Peanut Butter, which is to help kids reach their true potential by providing them speech, physical, and occupational therapies. $1 billion would just let me reach that many more kids that much more quickly. But I wouldn't change anything. And I don't know that I could have answered that when I was a kid. When I was a young kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. That's all I wanted to be. But I suck at math. And I have a really poor sense of direction. So I realize now that probably would not have been the best career choice for me. But again, I think, and it's funny because this conversation has caused me to think about things that I haven't really thought about in many, many years about, when I was growing up. And I just remember, my dad was pretty cool in the sense that he basically said, I remember once he said, whatever you like to do, just do. So this is when I was like 16, 17. He said, if you like garbage, which I don't like garbage, but if you like garbage, he said, that's cool, but own the garbage truck and start your own garbage company. If you like, whatever, just the message was do it on your own terms. So, that kind of stuck with me a little bit because my dad was a dentist, and for a while was in a partnership, and his partners were not the nicest of people. And then he went out on his own. And what was really cool is as I got a little bit older, I got to see him on his own, and he would sometimes give some cases away or give massive discounts to people that couldn't afford it. And, that influences me more today than it did when I was 22, 23. But I think back, the foundational thing was there. It's funny, like I was really encouraged to do whatever I wanted, but it was after that business, or after I walked away from that business, really at that point is when everybody was kind of hammering me to put me in a box and do all these things that, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I know that I didn't just want to do what other people told me I should do.
Yeah, and I think that's a very common theme here. In fact, one of our most popular episodes was one entitled Too Many Interests, Not Sure What to Do, do this. And I talk about that very thing because at 18, 19 years old, say, even like 20, even 25 years old for me, I still had so many interests. And there's this pressure, this societal pressure to pick one of those things as early as possible and to kind of succeed in the short term. By the time you're 25, to have been like settled into a career and you have a house and 2 cars and maybe you're married or have a significant other, that sort of pressure. And so people feel this like desire to have it all figured out, their life trajectory figured out at like 18 years old. And I don't think that's the case. I think your dad was really smart in saying, just what are you interested in right now? Pursue that for a bit, maybe for a season, maybe combine a few interests, and what you should do long term will eventually reveal itself to you. And then that, of course, coupled with the principle of, not the principle, but there's that saying, you're either building somebody else's dream or you're building your own. And so being able to have control and self-governance with whatever you do, starting a business is a great way to do that. I just think that's a great combination. But would you have anything to speak to that specifically in regards to someone who is younger and has multiple interests and feels this pressure to like pick one thing now because they feel like they have to succeed in the short term?
If I could go back and tell my 22-year-old self anything, it would be to do whatever you want that makes you happy. Because there is time to figure it out. I'm 43, which I know is old as guests go for your show, but I've reinvented myself several times. The stuff, the nonprofit, the podcast, these things were not on my radar 2 years ago, and now they're like the most central things in my life. So, you have a lot of time to figure it out. The other thing, and this really wasn't in that combination of those two things you were talking about, but that I think every young person should do, is that there are so many cool opportunities to get out of your comfort zone by leaving the country. And, they have so many programs for young people where you can, work a semester, or even if you're not in college, where you can go like volunteer and essentially your room and board is paid for. And, you might work in a coffee shop or something during the week, but then like your weekends are yours, and it's so cheap to travel around Europe by train. And you can really expand your knowledge of yourself by going into a place where you don't understand anything. It gives you such great perspective into the world. It gives you such great perspective into yourself. And I think that can help kind of narrow the scope down a little bit in terms of what things you might want to do.
Yeah, I would say that extend that to apply to really anything that you're sort of a little bit afraid of. Any kind of risk or maybe fear that you lean into is ultimately a good thing, because stepping into that is really, it will teach you a lot more about yourself. And I think, like what you said, travel is probably one of the best mechanisms to do that, because it's just right off the bat, you're in a new country, maybe you don't speak the language. there's all these things that you have to figure out and you really discover who you are. And for people listening, two great resources for that I just wrote down. Blake Bowles, who's been on the podcast before. You can just search for him at successfuldropout.com. And Uncollege, I think it's .org, also is a great resource for that. People that can kind of set you up with these traveling programs. But Dr. Richard, I am curious, you've mentioned the podcast, we've mentioned the podcast a few times now, but I am curious to hear what made you start the Daily Helping, what's the mission there? I know you've mentioned it one or two times already. And I guess, how's it doing and where is it headed long term?
Well, yeah, it's a weekly show, but it's called the Daily Helping. So that's not by accident. I mean, it is eventually going to be a daily show. And I'm excited because, we're sitting here. I don't know when this is going to air, but it's September 19th, and I'm already booked so far out. I'm scheduling into February and March of next year for guests, which is really cool. Really, the impetus for the show was I was doing my clinical work, and I love it. I mean, I'm grateful that I get to help kids. I work in part, not totally, but some kids that have been abused both physically and or sexually. So that's heavy work. And it's cool to influence people kind of in that micro setting, that one-on-one thing. But I thought to myself, boy, a show would be really cool to do. And what if I could just bring on all these people who have various backgrounds and very, very diverse kind of people to talk about success and happiness. And what if I could reach a ton of people? And then I started doing number crunching, Kylan, and I figured out that I've already reached far more people from the show in terms of downloads than I could in multiple lifetimes working for 40 years as a psychologist. So it was really to help more people, to influence more people, which is cool. And now I'm getting, the coolest thing is, I'm sure for you, is when somebody sends you an email and talks about how the show has helped them. And I mean, that's extremely cool for me. So, the show continues to grow. More and more places are in the media are kind of knowing who I am now, which is great. And again, I think that life, and this is another important lesson that which I would have loved to go back and tell myself at the age of 20 something, because I was such an obnoxious punk in my early 20s, is to stay humble. And you're not awesome. Life can be awesome, and you might have great. You might have great. Well, you are awesome, but you can't let it go to your head. And I mean, I'm the same. I don't care how big the show gets. I want the show, of course, to continue growing, but I'm going to be the same dude wearing T-shirts, and it's just all about feeling good in your skin. And when I'm doing the podcast, when I'm going on shows like yours, it's just pure pleasure for me. I have so much fun doing it. I'm always grateful when people have me on and when people come on mine. And it's the movement. I'm just looking forward to, waking up one day and knowing that there's a million people out there every day that are doing awesome random stuff for others. I talk about this sometimes. My favorite thing to do is when I'm in the grocery store, I love to buy the cart of groceries and the person behind me, and they totally freak out. And, I don't say, hey, I'm Dr. Richard. And, it's nothing like that. I just say, hey, I like to help others. And would you mind if I bought your groceries? And after they figure out that it's not a scam or something, their whole facial expressions really change in a cool way. And I just say, hey, just go do something nice for somebody else. So that's the kind of thing that I'm just hoping that lots of people do in different ways. And if that is successful, then the podcast has been worthwhile.
So where do you go buy groceries? I'm going to make sure and...
Well, you'd have I know where you are in the country, and I'm in Atlanta, so you'd have a pretty tough commute. But
might not be worth the savings.
No, I wouldn't think the time differential would be worth it for you. But if you're in the Atlanta metro area, there is a chance that I might be buying your groceries one day.
It's so great. I love it, man. And again, tell us really quick how we can join the My Daily Helping movement. Is it just using the hashtag as we do something nice for others on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you can find me and learn more about the show at thedailyhelping.com, which has links to everything, and my show's app is up on iTunes and Android, so you can pull it down there as well. But yeah, I mean, the thing to do is go do something awesome for somebody, and particularly like, don't do it for your mom, although that's nice. Do it for somebody you don't know, because that feels better. It just does, you know.
Yeah.
And I won't get wild here with science, but you know, we live in a pretty cool era, and we've done some neat research in terms of neuroscientists who have hooked up imaging, real-time in vivo imaging to people's brains. And what we know is that the same pleasure and reward systems in our brain light up when we give just as much as we do when somebody gives us something in return. But societally, we don't focus on that. So I just, encourage everybody to go out there, do something cool for somebody else, and then on, your hashtag #MyDailyHelping on Facebook, Twitter, Insta, wherever.
I love it, man. I mean, it's so... as we encourage people on the show all the time to, whatever they're doing, make sure it is, again, what I mentioned earlier, it's useful to others. It helps others. It makes the world a better place, and something that, it's a truism that I feel like a lot of people forget or don't realize, because we're also naturally inclined to focus on ourselves, is the fact that everything, money, opportunity, everything in this world that will come to you eventually, that you'll eventually gain at some point, is going to come in some way, shape, or form from other people. I mean, even just money. I remember we had Jesse Elder on the show, and he was talking about his philosophy on money, and he asked me where money comes from, and his answer was, he's like, money comes from other people's bank accounts. He's like, that's the way I look at it. And it's true, and I think the same could be said for opportunities and jobs. It all comes from other people, and so to be focused on other people more than you're focused on yourself, I think, is really one of the keys to leveling up your life on a consistent basis. Another thing that you might be familiar with, just in terms of psychologically, the act of giving. I've noticed. Say, for instance, I want to be very wealthy, which I do, and we're on our way to that. But if for instance, right now, I'm not, and say I'm struggling just to pay the basic bills every month, but I've still got some money, and I still want to enjoy, I still want to give. I feel like something psychologically happens when you reach into your wallet and say you give $10 to somebody or to a cause you believe in. You might feel at the time that you don't have that $10 to give, but it's almost like psychologically the act of giving it, even though you don't have a lot of money to begin with, it's like it's telling your brain that you do have money, because otherwise how could you give it? Does that kind of make sense at all? It's like this, it's philosophy of the be do have paradigm that we've talked about before on the show, that in order to have something, say a lot of free time, or to say wealth, you have to first be that thing even before you have it.
I will say this, certainly when we give, and not give because say, hey, life's tough right now, I'm going to give you $10 because I know the universe, if I give you 10, the universe is going to give me 50. That's not giving.
Right.
It really isn't. To truly give is to give with the expectation of nothing in return. But it's funny. This has come up 3 times today, once with a journalist, and then on another live show I was just on, and now here. There's something in psychology, a term called confirmation bias. And essentially what that is we look for selective pieces of information to confirm our beliefs about something. So to your point, Kylon, if we focus on everything that's wrong in our life, how little money we have, how stressed out we are, got to pay the bills, whatever, that's what we're focused on. And you're not. Whereas if your focus instead is from that of gratitude, that of, boy, I woke up with a roof over my head today. I'm alive. I don't have cancer. There's a million things in 20 seconds you and I could come up with that are amazing. that, many people in the world aren't experiencing. And as an activity, I'm a firm believer in journaling. In fact, twice a day, when I wake up, I write 3 things I'm grateful for, and then at the end of the day, I write 3 things that were awesome that happened today that I'm also grateful for. And one, it keeps me grounded, but it keeps me focused on all of the positive things in my life, because from a neurological standpoint, essentially when we have habits, when we have thought patterns, those actually have physical structures that are mapped in our brain as neural pathways. And much like a tree that grows over time, the more we have a habit, good or bad, the more we have a belief system, there's actually a physical structure that has to be broken down and withers away. And so, that's why we talk about, habits are hard to change, because you have to unwire. As Yoda says, you must unlearn what you have learned, and it's not easy, because you're fighting biology and environment.
Yep.
But it goes in the sense that if somebody was of that mindset, that scarcity mindset, that fear mindset, and they started doing that activity twice a day, focusing on all of the positive things, all of the things they're grateful for, you watch how quickly that mindset shifts. And when that mindset shifts, one becomes open to new possibilities. And instead of, believing that things are all going to hell in a handbasket, you find yourself believing that you can do awesome things and looking for that next opportunity, which might fall on your doorstep.
Yeah, it's like what Tony Robbins says. Everybody in the world is trying to do 2 things. They're trying to find or pursue happiness or meaning, and they're trying to avoid suffering. And he talks about all suffering comes from focus on self, and these thought patterns, these 3 thought patterns when you're focused on yourself, of loss, less, and never. And so to simply start trying to avoid those is a great first step. And like you said, every morning when my wife and I wake up, we do just journaling, and it's very basic, but one of those key things that we do is writing down 3 things that we're grateful for that day. We also have this thing called, this is going to sound corny, but we call it the awesome jar. And it's just literally a jar that has awesome written on it. And we have that sitting in our house, and a little pad of sticky notes and a pen by it. And so whenever something awesome happens, we write it down, stick it in the jar. And even now our friends, they'll come over and visit, they'll do it too. And it's fun to be able to do that and then look back when you're looking for things to be grateful, all these awesome things that have happened.
I love the awesome jar concept. And another thing that, you made me think about when you mentioned friends is, if you're in a place in your life and you're kind of lost and you're not quite sure what the next step is, and even if you're feeling kind of negativistic, really think about who you're hanging out with. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of, if you're hanging out with a crowd that, is very negativistic, they're working at jobs they hate, they're bitching about their bosses, their lives, that's infectious to you and your subconscious, whether you're aware of it or not. And I know, Jim Rohn, this has been said on every podcast in the world, that we're, the average of the 5 people we hang around the most. But it's really true. Napoleon Hill talked about it in Think and Grow Rich. Dale Carnegie talked about it. Everybody's known this for a really long time. And if you want to achieve awesome things in your life, and again, awesome is how you determine awesome. Awesome can mean $1 billion. Awesome can mean that you live on a boat. Awesome could mean that you get to surf all day. Awesome is whatever you want awesome to be. But you need to find people to surround yourself that share your definition of awesome and will help you get there.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Richard, we're coming down to the last couple questions that I like to ask everybody who comes on to the show. Just some parting advice. And so the first one is, what parting advice do you have for any of our listeners right now who are wrestling with the idea of dropping out of formal schooling, but they haven't quite made that step yet? Because that's a lot of our listeners, not just several. So what parting advice would you have for those people?
I would say to you guys who are kind of at that place, do I stick it out in college or do I not? really ask yourself and be honest with yourself as to why you would stay or why you wouldn't. And if the answer is, I'm staying in college so that I don't piss my parents off, if that's the only reason, then you might not want to be in college. I'd start there.
Great place to start. And on the flip side, how about any parting advice for those of our listeners who have already made that decision and dropped out, and they're on their entrepreneurial journey, searching for that meaning? My belief, and this is especially having gone through it myself, is engage in things that you are passionate about. And even if you don't know how to monetize them, you don't have a clue as to how it could become a business, do things that feel good to you and help others. And if you do that, a path will become clear one way or another as to how you can make that your living. Awesome. Well, Successful Dropouts, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around the most, and you've been hanging out with Dr. Richard and Kylan, learning what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. For everything we talked about today, head over to successfuldropout.com and type Richard or Dr. Richard into the search bar, and the show notes will pop right up. And as always, stay hungry, stay foolish, and cut. That was awesome. That was a lot of fun. That was fantastic, man. I really enjoyed that. Thanks for well, thanks for your time, first of all. Sorry it was a little later, but no worries. No worries at all. Great answers, very articulate, and I love your message. Plain and simple. I appreciate that. It's so funny. It's starting now. Like, I really feel. I'm essentially, this week is 4 months of aired episodes. So even though I've been working on the podcast for like 18 months before I launched it, like, I really feel like now it's starting to get traction. I'm going on a lot of shows. I don't know if you heard my EO Fire interview, but like, my traffic has gone bananas since then. Really? And I really think like that this is going to happen. That there is going to, I don't know when, but I know I'm going to wake up one day and like Oprah Winfrey is going to tweet out #MyDailyHelping, and everybody's going to be doing it, and it's going to be cool. So, like I said, like if one person from your show decides they're going to make a change because of this, then I'm really grateful for that opportunity. I got an email yesterday from a kid who heard me on EO Fire and said that, and then he went and like binge listened to all my episodes, and said he's been struggling with suicide, and hearing me really made him believe that he could go after his dreams and do whatever he wants, and he wants to start his own podcast. And I said, hey man, when you start it, I'll come on it. I don't even care what your topic is. And like, that's the thing that's so cool. Like you said you want to be a millionaire. I want financial freedom. I want time freedom. I want, that, my wife and kids will never have to worry about anything in the event that something happens to me. Like, I want the same things you do, but I just want to have fun doing it. I'm at this point in my life where I really don't want to compromise on everything. Like, everything I do has to drill down to my mission, or I'm not doing it, and it has to be fun, or I'm not doing it. So I'm super grateful for all the cool stuff I get to do as it relates to this show. No, I love that, man, and I'm glad it's starting to gain some traction and take off, and that's really the key. I know I said I want to be wealthy and all this stuff. Who doesn't? And I've done a couple episodes on this now. People's tendency when they do set long-term goals to make them very financial and material based. We hear that all the time. Like, I want $1 million by, like, in my 20s, and this kind of house and this kind of car. That's something that several years back I stopped doing, and instead framed all of my longer-term goals in terms of lifestyle, specifically how I wanted to spend my time and who I wanted to spend my time with. Yes, yes. You're speaking my song so strongly. I told my wife yesterday, I said, I want 10 hours a week to play video games. I want to, and I'm not kidding. That's awesome. I want 10 hours. It doesn't have to be all in one day. It can be, 2 hours here and 3 there and whatever. I said, I want the freedom to do that. I want to go to a Monday night football game and not have to work on Tuesday, because if I want. So yep. I'm hoping, and it looks like it's moving this way.
as much as I like the psychology work that I do, it's become a time constraint. And I really think that, when I'm able to walk away from my practice and dedicate all my time that I want to dedicate to my 501c3 and to the podcast, it's really going to be an even cooler life than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah, I love it, man. It's counterintuitive, though, I know, for a lot of people to not set, well, you can still set financial goals, but to not make them primary. But it's pretty amazing how now, for me specifically, like 3-4 years later since I changed that mindset, the money is sort of coming to support the lifestyle that I already have, which is, when I say I'm living the dream, I actually mean it. Like, I live in the mountains in my dream location. I spend my time almost 100% how I want to. It doesn't mean I have responsibilities and things that, but it's like,
of course,
it doesn't mean I work still. I work a lot, probably over 40 hours a week still, but it's all stuff I really enjoy. And
so it doesn't feel like work. It's I have
control over it, and the money has, it seems to just come as a result, which is pretty amazing. I do think there is a point where, again, I mentioned those three things, like useful, happy, and smart. And the smart in there is very important to me, because I think it is not just enough to pursue your passion and that is it. It's not enough to just do, at least for me, to just do things that are useful to other people and things that make me happy. I think it does also have to be smart, because, like you said, like, I want to provide for my family. I have a family to provide for, so it has to be something that does make sense, that does have, say, earning potential, if we're talking about more in financial terms here, but that's never the primary goal, and that's just seemed to have worked so far.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have the same exact mindset. I mean, I speak in very vague terms in terms of money, but what I also say pretty much when I say, one day I'm going to make 8 figures, is I'm going to give the vast majority of my earnings away to charity. Mm-hmm. So, it's even then, when I reach that summit, and we'll all get there, it's okay, cool. Like, I've done this. Now, how can I turn that into something for the betterment of everybody? So, and I think that's so different than like I said, I was such a prick when I was a kid, and I don't know why. Like, my parents are the most down to earth, wonderful people. But when I got out of college, man, was I materialistic, and it's just not how I was raised. But, I mean, honestly, as crazy as it sounds, getting almost killed was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
Well,
let's hope it doesn't happen again.
Happen again, yeah.
We don't know more.